Look up at the night sky. What do you see? Pinpricks of light? Infinite darkness? For most of us, it's a canvas of distant beauty, but for a select few, it's a cosmic puzzle, a grand symphony waiting to be understood. One such mind belonged to a young man named Stephen, and his journey, though rooted firmly on Earth, would take him to the very edge of the universe, not in a spaceship, but through the boundless expanse of his own intellect. This is a story about the ultimate frontier, the human will. Born in Oxford, England in 1942, Stephen Hawking was, by all accounts, no ordinary child. He was brilliant, yes, but not in a conventional, textbook-perfect way. He was curious, intensely so. He once dismantled a clock to see how it worked, much to his parents' chagrin. At school, he wasn't top of the class by rote learning, but because his mind simply wrestled with concepts in a way no one else's did. By the time he reached Oxford University, Stephen was a whirlwind of energy. He loved parties, he loved debating, he loved life. He even joined the university's boat club, not for glory, but to feel the thrill of pushing his physical limits, of being part of something bigger than himself. He was popular, quick-witted, and carried himself with an effortless, almost arrogant confidence that only truly intelligent young men possess. After Oxford, his path led him to Cambridge for his postgraduate studies, a hallowed ground for some of the world's greatest thinkers. It was 1963. He was just 21 years old, brimming with ambition, on the cusp of truly delving into the mysteries of the universe. He was contemplating the very fabric of space and time, the origins of everything. And then a tiny, almost imperceptible tear began to appear in the fabric of his own existence. It started subtly, a slight clumsiness, a stumble here, a dropped book there, things he could initially laugh off, blame on too much studying, or just being a bit uncoordinated. But then, the laughter began to feel forced. The coordination issues became more frequent, more noticeable. His family, his friends, they started to see it too. The questions began to form, unspoken at first, then whispered. Something wasn't right. The appointments began. Tests, more tests, and then the words. Words that would forever cleave his life into a before and after. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. A cruel, relentless disease that attacks the nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord, controlling voluntary muscle movement. In layman's terms, his body would progressively fail him, while his mind terrifyingly would remain perfectly intact. The prognosis was bleak. Just 2 years, they said. 2 years at best. Imagine that. You're 21. Your mind is buzzing with theories about the universe. Your life stretching out before you, full of infinite possibilities. And then, a doctor hands you a death sentence, telling you that your own body will betray you, piece by agonizing piece. The shock was profound. The despair, absolute. How do you process that? How do you even begin to breathe? For a time, Stephen retreated into himself. He felt betrayed by his own body, by fate. The future he'd envisioned, a life of research, exploration, laughter, seemed to evaporate like mist. Why bother with anything when time was so brutally short? He stopped working on his doctorate. He stopped socializing. The vibrant young man who had once rode with such vigor, who had charmed rooms with his wit, now felt like a ghost, trapped in a rapidly failing vessel. The silence was deafening, filled only with the chilling countdown of his own mortality. But a mind like Stephen Hawking's, it wasn't built to stay defeated for long. Even in the deepest pits of despair, a tiny flicker of defiance began to ignite. A question began to form, not why me? Zrania, but what if? What if the universe had more to say than a doctor's prognosis? What if this wasn't the end, but a different kind of beginning? The early months after the diagnosis were a haze of despair. The world, once so full of vibrant colors and boundless possibilities, had shrunk to the four walls of his room, overshadowed by a chilling silence. Every movement was a struggle, every thought a painful reminder of what was slipping away. Stephen, the energetic and brilliant young man, had become a prisoner within his own body, his spirit wrestling with a future that seemed to hold only decline. He stopped going to lectures. He avoided his friends. What was the point, he reasoned, if all roads led to the same inevitable, grim destination? The universe, which had once called to him with such intoxicating mystery, now felt like a cruel, indifferent void. But within that void, something began to stir. Perhaps it was the sheer stubbornness that had always been a part of him, that same quiet tenacity that made him dismantle clocks as a child. Or perhaps it was the fleeting realization that while his body might be failing, his mind, that extraordinary engine of thought, remained untouched, fiercely alive. And then there was Jane. She was the sister of a friend, met just before his diagnosis, during those last vibrant days of his unburdened youth. When the news hit, when Stephen withdrew, many others might have faded away, but not Jane Wilde. She saw beyond the faltering steps and the increasingly slurred speech. She saw the luminous intellect, the sharp wit, the profound human spirit that still burned brightly beneath the encroaching shadow. Jane didn't pity him. She saw a man facing an unimaginable challenge, and she simply chose to stand by him. She brought light into his darkness, not through grand gestures, but through quiet persistence, through shared laughter, and through an unwavering belief in him that Stephen himself had lost. She reminded him of the world outside, of the conversations to be had, the ideas to be explored. Her presence became an anchor, grounding him when he felt adrift, yet also a sail, catching the winds of his intellect and pushing him forward. Her steadfastness was a revelation. It jolted him out of his self-pity, making him realize that if someone else could see worth and a future in him, then perhaps he should too. It was a love that wasn't born of convenience or ease, but forged in the crucible of adversity. With Jane by his side, something fundamental shifted. The 2-year prognosis, which had felt like a death sentence, now became a perverse kind of motivation. If time was so cruelly limited, then every second suddenly held immense value. He couldn't afford to waste it in despair. He had to live it. He had to think it. He returned to his studies with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed. The lectures he had once found boring now buzzed with urgency. He realized that while his body might be contracting, his mind could still expand, infinitely. His previous doctoral work on the expansion of the universe suddenly took on a new, deeply personal resonance. His own body was contracting. Perhaps the universe itself held clues to its own beginning, its own end. He threw himself into the abstract world of mathematics and physics, a realm where physical limitations simply ceased to exist. In his mind, he could walk, he could run, he could soar through cosmic dust and black holes. The more his physical world shrank, the more his intellectual universe exploded with possibility. He found a freedom in theory, a liberation in equations. It was during this period that the seeds of his groundbreaking work began to sprout. The idea that black holes might not be entirely black, that they could emit radiation, a concept that would later become famously known as Hawking radiation, began to percolate. He wasn't just solving problems, he was seeing the universe in an entirely new light, a perspective perhaps sharpened by the unique vantage point of his own confinement. His life, once defined by what he was losing, was now being redefined by what he was gaining. An unparalleled clarity of thought, a renewed sense of purpose, and a profound understanding of time's preciousness. He had stared into the abyss of his own mortality, and instead of being consumed, he had found within himself a defiant, brilliant spark. The fight was far from over, but Stephen Hawking had chosen his weapon, his mind. The spark had ignited, the purpose had solidified. Stephen Hawking, now driven by a fierce urgency, dove headfirst into the abyss of space-time. But as his mind soared to the farthest reaches of the cosmos, his body continued its relentless, heartbreaking decline. The 2-year prognosis had stretched, mercifully, but the disease was an unyielding force. His gait became more unsteady, his speech more slurred. Everyday tasks that most of us take for granted, eating, dressing, even simply moving across a room, became monumental challenges. The frustration must have been immense, a brilliant, active mind trapped within a body that was slowly, systematically failing its commands. Imagine the agony of having a universe of ideas brimming within you, but struggling to articulate a single sentence. Yet it was in this crucible of constraint that his genius truly began to forge its most groundbreaking work. He pursued his doctoral thesis, focusing on the very beginning of time and space, the Big Bang, and the enigmatic nature of black holes. He theorized that if the universe began as a singularity, then black holes might contain singularities at their core. These were ideas that challenged conventional wisdom, pushing the boundaries of what was understood about physics itself. In 1970, with Roger Penrose, he put forward the singularity theorems, suggesting that black holes aren't just theoretical constructs, but a natural outcome of gravity, and that the universe itself began from a singularity. This was a colossal leap in our understanding of the universe's origins and fate. His work wasn't just about abstract calculations. It was about trying to understand the fundamental rules that govern existence, a quest made even more poignant by his own personal battle with the limits of his own existence. But the communication barrier was growing. As his speech deteriorated further, the sheer effort to convey a thought became exhausting, almost impossible. His colleagues and family struggled to understand him. It was a cruel irony. The man with the most profound ideas was losing his ability to share them. Then came the breakthrough that would give him a voice, quite literally. In the mid-1980s, after a tracheotomy due to a bout of pneumonia, which completely robbed him of his natural speech, he was given a speech synthesizer. It was a bulky, rudimentary device at first, operated by a small switch he could control with his cheek muscle, the only muscle he could reliably move. And from this simple, almost robotic voice flowed some of the most complex and beautiful explanations of the universe. It was an unmistakable voice, recognizable across the globe, not just for its unique timbre, but for the profound wisdom it carried. It became a symbol of defiance, of the human spirit's refusal to be silenced. He once joked that the American accent of the voice synthesizer was more his speed, and he refused to change it, embracing this new, unique identity. This assistive technology didn't just allow him to communicate, it liberated him. It allowed him to write books, give lectures, and engage with the scientific community and the public like never before. With this new voice, his most famous work, A Brief History of Time, burst onto the world stage in 1988. It was a book that aimed to make the most complex ideas about the cosmos accessible to everyone, and it became an international bestseller. Suddenly, the world was listening to Stephen Hawking. They weren't just hearing about black holes and the Big Bang. They were hearing the story of a mind that refused to yield, a spirit that continued to explore, even from the confines of a wheelchair. Despite his worsening condition, life continued to blossom around him. He married Jane, and they had 3 children. He was a father, a husband, a professor, a global figure, living a life of immense purpose and impact, far beyond what any doctor's prognosis had predicted. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving, pushing the boundaries of both science and human endurance. The universe was his canvas, and his intellect, now amplified by technology, was his brush. With his iconic voice and the best-selling A Brief History of Time, Stephen Hawking transcended the world of academia. He became a global phenomenon, a household name, and arguably the most recognizable scientist since Einstein. He appeared on TV shows, from The Simpsons to Star Trek, and his unique perspective on life, the universe, and everything captivated millions far beyond the halls of Cambridge. This wasn't just about his groundbreaking theories, it was about him. The man in the wheelchair defying every expectation, his mind a limitless cosmos. He became a symbol of human potential, a living testament to the idea that true limitations are rarely physical. His fame wasn't sought, but it was used. He became a powerful advocate for disability rights, reminding the world that intelligence and capability are not defined by physical form. He campaigned tirelessly for better access and understanding, breaking down barriers not just in physics, but in society's perception of what it means to be truly alive. He was a master communicator, simplifying incredibly complex concepts into understandable, often witty prose. His humor, sharp and often self-deprecating, became as famous as his theories. He once quipped, "My expectations were reduced to 0 when I was 21. Everything since then has been a bonus. This wasn't cynicism, it was a profound acceptance, a radical embrace of every moment, every thought, every interaction as an unlooked-for gift. He never shied away from the philosophical questions that his condition brought forth. He reflected deeply on the nature of human existence, our place in the vastness and the relentless march of time. He pondered the future of humanity, warning of the dangers of climate change and artificial intelligence, urging us to explore beyond Earth to secure our long-term survival. His insights weren't confined to textbooks. They resonated in boardrooms, classrooms, and living rooms around the world. Of course, a life lived under such extreme pressure, with such profound physical demands, took its toll on his personal relationships. The unwavering dedication of his first wife, Jane, was immense, but the strain of being both caregiver and partner for decades was undeniable. Their relationship, which had been his bedrock in the early years, evolved and eventually transitioned. These were the very human complexities of a life lived on the edge of what was physically possible, a reminder that even the most extraordinary individuals face ordinary human struggles. But through it all, his intellectual pursuit never ceased. Even as his physical abilities diminished to the point where only a single cheek muscle allowed him to communicate, he continued to publish, to lecture, to theorize. His mind, the final frontier, remained relentlessly active, pushing the boundaries of physics, exploring multiverses, and challenging established norms right up until his final days. He famously stated, "However difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at." This wasn't just an idle platitude from a man of privilege. It was a hard-won truth from someone who had faced the bleakest possible prognosis and turned it into a springboard for unparalleled achievement. He was proof that the human spirit, when fueled by curiosity and an unshakable will, can find purpose and triumph in the most unexpected and challenging of circumstances. Stephen Hawking wasn't just a scientist who explored black holes. He was a human being who stared into the void of his own mortality and chose to fill it with light. He showed us that our greatest strengths often emerge from our deepest vulnerabilities, and that the universe isn't just out there, waiting to be discovered, but very much within us, waiting to be unleashed. His journey wasn't about avoiding the inevitable. It was about living every moment of the improbable. On March 14, 2018, the world lost Stephen Hawking. He passed away peacefully at the age of 76, decades beyond the 2 years he was initially given. The news rippled across the globe, bringing a profound sense of loss, but also immense gratitude for a life lived so fully, so brilliantly, and so courageously. He was laid to rest in Westminster Abbey, joining the pantheon of scientific giants like Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin. It was a fitting tribute to a man who had not only stood on the shoulders of giants, but had also dared to gaze even further into the cosmic unknown. His scientific legacy is, without question, monumental. He revolutionized our understanding of black holes, showing that they weren't just devourers of matter, but also radiators of energy, a concept that fundamentally altered quantum mechanics and gravity. His work on the origins of the universe continues to shape cosmological thought, pushing us to ask deeper questions about our own existence. He left behind a rich tapestry of theories, equations, and insights that will continue to inspire and challenge physicists for generations to come. He taught us that the universe is not just vast, but also deeply strange and wonderfully complex, always revealing new layers to those brave enough to look closely. But perhaps his most profound legacy isn't written in scientific papers or complex equations. It's etched in the hearts and minds of millions who saw in him not just a brilliant mind, but an indomitable spirit. Stephen Hawking became a living testament to the sheer power of the human will. He showed us that the greatest prisons are often not the physical ones, but those we construct in our own minds. He proved that limitations, however severe, do not define us. Our response to them does. He transcended disability, not by overcoming it in a physical sense, but by proving that intellect, curiosity, and a sense of humor can flourish regardless of physical constraints. He was a beacon of hope for anyone grappling with adversity, a reminder that however daunting the challenge, there is always always something you can do. You can think, you can learn, you can create, you can love, you can contribute, you can inspire. His life was a masterclass in resilience, in turning profound weakness into extraordinary strength. He harnessed technology to amplify his voice when his own failed him, becoming a pioneer in how humanity can adapt and thrive. He looked at a universe that seemed indifferent and found within it profound beauty and order, constantly seeking answers, even as the clock of his own life ticked with an unusual rhythm. So, what can we take from Stephen Hawking's extraordinary journey? It's this. Your mind is your greatest superpower. It is boundless, capable of reaching where no body can. When faced with what feels like an insurmountable obstacle, remember his quiet defiance, his unyielding pursuit of knowledge, his unwavering belief in the power of curiosity. Look at your own life. What are the limits you've accepted? What are the stories you've told yourself about what you can't do? Stephen Hawking's life challenges us to break free from those self-imposed boundaries. It urges us to find our own unique voice, to pursue our passions with fierce determination, and to remember that even when the world around us seems to shrink, the universe within our minds remains infinite. Because just like the stars he so brilliantly studied, the human spirit, when truly ignited, can shine through the deepest darkness, leaving an eternal light for all to follow.